And welcome back to the Zero Technique Football Podcast. I am your host, Ryan Stern from backsportspage.com. Make sure you're checking out backsportspage.com for all your go-to articles that are going up on at such a great rate right now. We've got a great group of new writers, two of whom are joining me tonight. We're going to have such great content coming for you, not just on the site, but on this show. We've got a couple shows lined up for this week, and we're going to end up doing multiple shows a week, probably two during the week. And then, of course, the fantasy show will be on Sunday as well. But let me introduce my two co-hosts for tonight. First, we'll start off Blake Gardner. Welcome to the show, Blake. Just
thank you.
Give a little bit of a rundown of where you're from, teams that you have grown up watching, and some of your favorite players.
Oh yeah, so I'm a Florida guy. Been here since I was like 2 or 3 years old, moving from South Dakota. So we rep Florida over here. But ironically, growing up, I want to say I started watching football in 06, and most people know that was like one of the Chargers' last like actual chance at a Super Bowl. So like I gravitated towards that team. They had I want to say the AFC Championship game against the Patriots. I was a huge Patriots hater, and I think stuck with me there, and I've been riding with the Chargers ever since. Florida was kind of forced on me, but I'm not mad. I'm not mad about it at all. It's not a bad school at all. So just, growing up down here, my dad was a humongous Gator fan. Because I think without his influence, I still would rather be a Gator over a Seminole. So, not bad choice at all. So that's me. I'm a Florida guy. I'm hoping to cover Tampa this year. Actually should be having a new article coming out, a little something about Brady here tonight or tomorrow.
Awesome. So is the Chargers AFC Championship the one you're talking about? The one that Rivers actually tore his ACL and continued to play? Is that the?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Him and LT were the reasons why I started there, man. LT that year. Tom Brady started
as someone who really broke into the sports media end of things, covering fantasy football. That was my specialty when I first started breaking in. I was all about fantasy. And who better than LaDainian Tomlinson in fantasy
wow.
football?
I've never even thought about that. I was like 9 at the time.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I didn't start playing, fantasy till like 16, 17. So I never even really thought about that. I bet his fantasy numbers were crazy.
Yeah, well, the 28 touchdown year is the greatest season a fantasy running back has ever had. So, yeah, he's won a lot of people a lot of money. And then next we're gonna bring in Alex Sabri. How's it going, Alex? Welcome to the show.
It's going well. I am a relatively newer NFL fan. I've been around since the Jay Cutler, Alshon Jeffrey, Jordan Howard days in 2016. Watch the Chicago Bears have a bit of a roller coaster going up in 2018, getting 12-4, and then the double doink happened, and it's been kind of bad from there. So I really got into the NFL. Around 2015, 2016. Just watching that Vic Fangio-led defense really dominate for a long time. I got into college football as I got into college. Started writing about the Purdue Boilermakers. So just have a bit of a background from both, I guess, professional and college football. I'm a major Chicago Bears fan, considering I grew up, I think, an hour north of the north side of Chicago. So it was fun watching Justin Fields last year. It was fun just watching some, I guess, bright spots on the defense like Khalil Mack, Robert Quinn, and Keem Hicks. Though they have moved on from the 2018 year with Vic Fangio, a very exciting defense there that did score a lot of points, did score not a majority of points, but was a very focal part of how the Chicago Bears actually scored points that year. Yeah. So, and just looking forward to see, I guess, where the Bears can go from there.
So as a Giants fan, I guess you have me to thank for you guys being able to trade up for Justin Fields. in
Yes, thank
the 21 draft. I mean, the Giants landed a supreme star in Kadarius Toney. I mean, how could you not?
As a Florida fan, I didn't think he was a first-round pick. That's all I'm going to say.
So during that draft, I was actually covering. I was doing live updates for Back Sports Page, doing something like this for that draft with each of the picks. Now, Randy and I are the resident Giants fans on the staff, and the two of us we're just staring into the computer screens, asking what the hell did the Giants just do? Now, obviously, the kid's got a ton of talent, but oh my goodness, and especially with the linemen that were still on the board at the time, the obvious need for the linemen for the Giants, and the fact that they traded out of a spot that the pick after that was Micah Parsons. How awesome would have Micah Parsons looked? Rashawn Slater, you got who I was all about the Giants drafting at 11. He goes to the Chargers at 13, and I'm just staring at just wondering why. And we know the reason why is because Dave Gettleman does not know how to run a football team.
I mean, y'all did get. Oh, sorry.
No.
Y'all did get Kayvon Thibodeau and Evan Neal the next year with the 4th and the 7th.
We did.
It was So y'all did get to upgrade the trenches a bit. So.
Right, and you want to know why? It's because Dave Gettleman's gone.
They
bring in Joe Shane, who's been a part of the rebuilding in Buffalo. They bring him in. He brings in Brian Daboll, who has been at least a big part of the development of Josh Allen over the past couple years. And now it seems like they're on the right track. Are we expecting a great season? I'm not. Am I looking for an improvement? Absolutely. I definitely think this team. Oh, I mean, you also can't get worse than what they were doing, especially at the end of the year last year with Colt McCoy and some of these other guys at the helm. Jake Fromm started a couple games for them. I mean, it was not a great time to be a Giants fan last year, but we were doing a perfect draft segment before the draft had started. And so I had put out that this was a couple hours before the draft started. And I said that the perfect draft for the Giants is Evan Neal, Kayvon Thibodeau. And I got Kayvon Thibodeau and Evan Neal. So I was thrilled with the picks this year. But the NFC East is going to be for another day. We are going to break down some of the top storylines of the NFC North today. And the NFC North, I mean, you've had a couple teams who have just been hovering in the same area of the NFL for years now. You've had the Packers just be at the top for quite some time. You've had the Lions be at the bottom for quite some time. And you've had the Vikings and Bears sort of take turns at being who's going to be second best, who's going to be and who's going to have the good defense this year, who's going to have the good offense this year. They take turns in alternating that. But it's been a very consistent, I guess you can say, division over the past couple of years. So we're going to break, like I said, we're going to break down some of the top storylines. And if you guys don't mind, I'm going to jump off with my first one. And speaking of the bottom feeding Detroit Lions, I have a feeling that this could be one of the most improved teams, maybe not on the defensive side, but on the offensive side. I think this could be one of the most improved offenses in the league. You get Dan Campbell, who is coming into his second year. He is one of the most respected coaches in the game. You get a healthy Deandre Swift coming in, and Deandre Swift is going to be such a huge part of this team. And then you also have someone like Jamal Williams, who has been one of the most consistent backup running backs in the league. And then you look at the wide receivers, because for how many weeks last year was it Khalif Raymond, Quintez Cephas? Those were the guys that were being relied upon. And it was the second half of the year that we saw the breakout of fourth-round draft pick from last year, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now they bring over someone like DJ Chark, who has had some success in Jacksonville. And they draft someone in Jameson Williams out of Alabama, who is the elite of the elite in terms of speed wide receivers. And you get Jared Goff, who actually throws a pretty decent downfield ball. He just didn't have the weapons to throw to. And you have TJ Hawkinson. If TJ Hawkinson is healthy, he's one of the top 5 tight ends in the league. PFF rated their offensive line as the number 3 offensive line coming into the 2022 season. Yeah. It really and it starts with, you look at Sewell, and you go back to that pick and you say, oh, they could have had Jamar Chase. And yeah, they could have had Jamar Chase. But without Penei Sewell, they're not doing anything in terms of getting the balls to their receivers. They bring in Taylor Decker to play over at left tackle. Frank Ragnow is one of the most consistent centers in the league. They got Vaitai over at guard, Jonah Jackson at left guard. This is a really solid offensive line. And for a team that did not score a whole lot of points last year, I really do think that this could be an offense that sort of takes off. And I'm not sure Jared Goff will be at the helm in 23, but he'll be good enough to get this offense on the right track when they draft their eventual successor. When you look at the 23 quarterback draft class, there's going to be 5 or 6 quarterbacks easily that go. Yeah. So, Blake, why don't you give a little bit of insight into how you feel about this lines out?
I like the O-line actually surprised me a little more than I remember, but the Goff thing, I think you hit right on the head, and that's why LA had to get rid of him, because he's good, but he's just not like, playoff, going to take you to the playoffs and win you a Super Bowl good. Which that's not what we're asking from the Lions right now. We're not asking the Lions to go win the Super Bowl this year. Nobody's expecting that. We're expecting a winning record, maybe even a wild card playoff berth. That's not too much to ask for. Jared Goff can get you that. So I do believe, with those additions, like you said, at wide receiver, they went crazy at wide receiver. Jameson Williams might be the first, receiver off the board if he's healthy. But as far as improvements on that offense, I don't know about, top. I can see them like around top 5, top 6 if they hit that potential, if they hit that ceiling.
Alex, how about you?
Personally, I very much agree with you that they are one of the most improved teams in terms of offense. I really like the DJ Chark signing. I personally wanted the Bears to go after him. And Jameson Williams, just watching him at Alabama, he was very much a very good playmaker. And obviously TJ Hawkinson, a very underrated draftee, but he was a very important part of that offense. I actually did not know that they were a top 5 unit in terms of the offensive line, but as a Bears fan, as a Purdue fan, I obviously know that having a very good offensive line is one of the most important things a team can have. They're, like you said, Blake, obviously not going to, have Super Bowl expectations with with Jared Goff behind center. Deandre Swift's a very good running back, but he's not, the elite in terms of the elite, and the wide receiver core can very much improve. But they certainly are one of the most improved offenses in the NFL. If I had to say who was one of, if not the most improved offenses, I certainly like both Ohio teams in terms of the Cincinnati Bengals, just because one of their biggest glaring holes, as we've seen in the Super Bowl, was the offensive line. And they've signed Lyle Collins, Alex Kappa, Ted Karras there, while really not allowing too many free agents to leave. I think they made some very smart decisions in the offseason to improve their offensive line.
Absolutely.
I mean, the Cleveland Browns, they traded for a very good starting quarterback. They have Jacoby Brissett, I think, as their backup, and also Baker Mayfield. Your team can only really be as good as your backup quarterback, as I've learned with having Chase Daniels as your backup. So both Ohio teams, I would very much consider to be the most improved offenses in the NFL, but I very much agree that they're at least top 5.
All right, Blake, why don't you give us your first storyline for the NFC North?
Got you. I just to add on to that Lions bit.
Oh yeah.
I've noticed last season, because the Chargers did this. The Chargers had like a 5-year span where they lost the game every way possible, especially important games. And I've noticed the Lions have been in that kind of swing, especially last season. There were a lot of games, and the stat I kept remembering as far as Chargers was games lost, by one possession. And I want to say Detroit led last year in that. So if they can just knock those out or win half of those, that's the big difference between
absolutely you win you win half of them. And I mean, are they going to be, again, like you said, they're not being asked to go and win a Super Bowl next year. It's just it's most likely not in the cards, especially when you look at the way some of these teams that were already near the top that just improved so much.
Yeah.
But this is the team that's now headed in the right direction, and improvement is what you're looking for a young team, and I think we're going to see it from them.
Sticking with offense, I really am interested to see the Vikings on offense. And I know, people may be thinking, you guys watching may be thinking, like, they didn't really add nobody crazy. Like, there wasn't any big. Well, new coach, Kyle O'Connell, the offense coordinator with the Rams, as we know, we just watched what Matt Stafford did last year. So he's going to bring that over. What I was interested in was, you have Dalvin Cook. You have one of the best running backs in the league when healthy. So do you veer from that running game? How does the running and pass game work? Because, you have Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen as well. So just looking into it, they hired running back coach Curtis Markins. He was in Denver, as we know. Jameson Williams, Melvin Gordon, two-headed monster. So he knows what he's doing with the run game there. And I noticed, I've been watching film. He doesn't stick to the zone. And if you know Vikings run nothing but zone football, and that's why Dalvin Cook's such a big hit or miss. But now they're going to be more what's the word they use, more multiple with their schemes as far as running. So and I think it's to run to pass. There's people that say, oh, you got to establish run before you pass. And I think that's exactly why, just to establish runs before the pass. So, yes, I'm really excited to see this offense, but also what about Dalvin Cook? You know what I'm saying? Who was it? Patrick Claiborne did a NFL Total Access with Justin Jefferson, and I just stole a quote from him. He asked him, what has changed most about the offense since, the new coaches got there and stuff. And Justin Jefferson said, the offense is not run first anymore. So this was recently, I think this was back in March. So this could be a completely different offense. One that I feel like a lot of, especially Vikings fans, probably wanted, which it was hard because you had Cook there, but you have, one of the best wide receiver duos in the league, and Kirk Cousins, who can be efficient. I'm not going to say he's consistently efficient, but he can be. So it's just going to be very interesting just to see, if they're going to be one of the better passing teams in the league this year, or Dalvin Cook is just going to continue to carry that load.
Now, shockingly, I was surprised when I had seen this. The Vikings passed the ball over 57% of the time last year. Really? And we are used to seeing them hover right around that 50-50 spot because they love to have that balance. That's just been part of, and especially with Zimmer's always been part of balance. So when I saw, and I know that it was the end for Zimmer, but, and again, you had made one point really well when healthy with Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook wasn't always healthy last year.
I was just going to add on, that may be the reason for that 57%, because those games where he's not healthy, yes, Alexander Madison had a couple good ones, but, they had to rely a little bit on him.
He missed 4 games, 4 total games, not including whatever games he had gotten injured during, but he was out for 4 of their 17 games. So I would like to, I'm going to actually do a little bit of a deeper dive and seeing what the run pass percentages were for those games that he had missed, and see if that was what sort of skewed those numbers
that'd be interesting.
towards the pass. Alex, what do you think about the Vikings offense this year?
I certainly think it will make very much of an improvement. I mean, you have 2 guys in the head coach and the offensive coordinator who literally just won a Super Bowl with the Los Angeles Rams. You mentioned they did start deviating more towards the pass, which could make Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, and Irv Smith Jr. very much more, I guess, involved in the offense. But they do still have Dalvin Cook. I guess you said when healthy, he would be a very good option. But I do also kind of trust Alex Madison as a backup running back should he go down. And they do have a designated fullback in CJ Ham. It seems like they have that, that offensive, I guess, creativity. Especially with the Rams, I think they had Alvin Kamara as the running back. So, I mean, they had, a good option there as well. But they do also have a good enough offensive line to where, they could be a very solid offensive team, especially in the NFC North.
Yeah, Christian Darrisaw he's going to be an absolute stud for a long time. And then they actually had one of my favorite mid-round picks in the draft last year with Ezra Cleveland, who they have over at left guard right now. The Vikings were actually my favorite. They were number 1 draft class in 21. Really? I absolutely.
I don't think that's outlandish to say.
Yeah, I mean, well, you get Darrisaw.
Especially with Kellen Mond of the 3rd round, he seemed, especially when he played at Texas A&M, I very much enjoyed watching him. Was he part of that game where when it's like 6-7 overtimes against LSU? Yeah, so that was extremely fun to watch with Mond.
Oh, yeah.
He's a very experienced, very smart option as a backup running back. I think if Kirk Cousins goes down, I don't know if he'll be, completely starting caliber just yet, but I very much like that selection for the Vikings.
Absolutely. So, Alex, why don't you give us your first storyline for the 22 season?
Okay, I guess starting off with something that's a bit simpler, something we already kind of talked about, is how close the Vikings are to really, the Lions are to really making the playoffs. We already know the Vikings have at least been playoff caliber in years past. But one thing I want to know is how close with Jared Goff, Deandre Swift, DJ Chark, who they just signed, TJ Hawkinson, I should say, and that much improved offensive line, as well as a bit of an improved defense. I don't know if, Jeff Okudah is really going to get a ton of snaps this year, but I just really want to know, are they finally in the position, especially with the Packers and the Vikings, how strong of a team they are and how much of the improvements they've made? Can they make the playoffs this year? Can they at least try to get like a wild card spot? If not this year, maybe 2 years, 3 years. How close are they to getting that?
Blake, what are your thoughts with that?
I mean, I was actually going to say, going back to earlier, I said, we weren't expecting Super Bowl, and that one, a playoff berth was definitely, within reason. I'll get into it later why that is in reason, because of the top dog in the NFC. They may not be the top dog, but there's a reason for that. And the sticks fall a certain way every year, and those certain teams, especially in this division, the Bears. We see the Bears in the playoffs sometimes when I bet you as a Bear fan could fully agree with me that they did not deserve to be there. Chargers have been there too, so I'm not biased as far as that, but I just think they are there in a playoff berth. As far as you're saying, you're asking how close they are to the playoffs. Yes, but are they still looking like they're probably gonna get knocked out first round? Yeah, definitely.
This is a division that is much more within reach for them than they have been in quite some time. And again, it may not just be because of their improvements, but because the other three teams in that division, I don't see any one of them being able to just run away and have a 3, 4, 5 game lead as we're
Even
heading
Green Bay.
into the back stretch of the season. Yeah, Green Bay does have Aaron Rodgers, who is now in the twilight of his career. There's always talk about his retirement, and now there's no Davante Adams and no real and no Marquez Valdez-Scantling as well, and nobody really except somebody who played at Division One AA, Christian Watson, to come in and replace.
And that was actually my other story. My second storyline was the Green Bay receiver room. Looking at it, you got, like you said, Alan Lazard, who, in all honesty, maybe he develops to be better, but in all honesty, right now looks like a solid wide receiver too. Not a bad option at all as far as wide receiver two. But that is your wide receiver one right now.
And there are so many
unless
people,
Christian Watson,
And there are so many people who are talking about Sammy Watkins being the number one. Sammy Watkins is not a number one receiver in the NFL
he
anymore,
hasn't had 1,000
and
yards
he hasn't
since
been
2015. Since 2015, he hasn't had a 1,000-yard season.
And he always goes off week one and then fails to match the stats from week one for the next 6 games combined. Alan Lazard is the number one wide receiver on that team. And if anything, it's because of the trust that he's earned from Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers trusts him. And you don't really notice it because he doesn't play that style of game. But Alan Lazard is like 6'5", 215. He's a big dude. And like I said, he doesn't play a big man's game. But I wonder if now with no Davante Adams in that room, are they going to utilize him? Are they going to utilize him in that type of role? And that's going to be the most interesting thing for me.
Yeah, it's honestly, I bet he's been hearing that a lot in camp. Like, you're the guy now, you're the guy. I just want to throw in there as well. Before we, when it gets back to me, we start on the downfall of Green Bay this year. Thought it was very notable to notice that Aaron has had Davante Adams since 2014. Now, granted, that wasn't his best year. We know that. He wasn't balling in 2014. But that was still when he had an aging Jordy Nelson, to compliment him. Davante Adams' first year with 1,000 yards was 2016. So the man has had a good Davante Adams since 2016. So I think Davante, I'm not going to say he doesn't get enough credit because we all know he's probably the best wide receiver in the NFL. But I don't think as many people realize like how important he was to this squad specifically. Like, a lot of people are excited about him going to the Raiders, but Aaron Rodgers just took a big hit because he doesn't have that dependable guy, that has literally been there since 2014.
Absolutely. And so I'm going to jump in with my next storyline, and this may upset Alex down there. I have a feeling that this could be a historically bad Chicago Bears defense this year. They weren't great last year, and then you talk about losing guys like Khalil Mack, who is one of the top 3 linebackers, if not overall defensive players in the league. Losing someone like Akeem Hicks, who has just been the not focal point, but he's been the backbone. He's been the soul of that defense. The one that they've been able to rely upon week in, week out for so long now. And he's not there anymore. You look at some of these names that are projected to start for the Bears, and you have Al-Qadim Muhammad and you have Robert Quinn, but Kyrus Tonga and Justin Jones on the defensive line. Now, you have to be a real diehard football fan to go ahead and tell me who these guys are. You have Nick Morrow and Matt Adams flanking Roquan Smith in the linebacker group. Eddie Jackson has been there for a while. He's not the same Eddie Jackson that he once was. Jalen Johnson is an okay cornerback, but he's their number one. I'm afraid that this could be a historically bad Chicago Bears defense. So I'm going to throw it to Alex because I know that he's probably got a lot to say about this one.
Okay. I'm just going to start off by saying you could certainly say that this Chicago Bears team will be one of, if not maybe the worst team in the NFL. I get that. Personally, I don't agree that they'll be a historically bad defense. Just watching Kyrus Tonga last year. What?
I'm also comparing it to the Chicago Bears defenses that we've just grown accustomed to dominating year in year out.
Standard.
So they've been the standard. I'm talking about in terms of Chicago's historical defense.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, when you compare like the best defenses in the NFL, you always compare it to like the 85, 86 Chicago Bears. I mean, 2010, 2011, they were very good. And as recently as 2018, they were
they played a Monday night game against the Giants that year that I was at. And the most significant thing about that team was they had 8 starters on the defensive line. They rotated almost on a play-in, play-out basis, and they were fresh from snap 1 to snap 75. And then, of course, you have Devin Hester returning punts. But that was the most impressive thing. They had 8 starters on the defensive line.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it was kind of the same in 2018, too. I mean, you had guys who could just rotate in, rotate out. I mean, Khalil Mack was doing pass coverage at some points. So, I mean, it was a very versatile team, a very strong team. This team, obviously, you can't really compare them to that 2018 team or even like 2020. But Kyrus Tonga, a very solid nose tackle. I very much like the Mario Edwards Jr. in terms of like a backup role. I think he did very solid in terms of a backup. Lakel London wasn't too bad. You still have Robert Quinn, who I think has like a career high in sacks or had a career high in sacks last year. Roquan Smith, I think is still a very smart and a very capable linebacker, someone who would be like a captain on your linebacking crew. Jalen Johnson, I mean, I don't personally agree with them taking Kyler Gordon or like a cornerback with like their first pick in the second round this year, especially with the needs that they had. But I think him and Jalen Johnson could be a very solid duo going into, I guess, the next 5-10 years. Jaquan Brisker, I very much like the selection for. He very much has the same kind of style, like the big kind of hitting strong safeties that you need in terms of the Chicago Bears. And Eddie Jackson, though he has kind of regressed in terms of tackling, things like that, I'll admit that, he is still very much a very good ball hawking safety, a very smart safety. Where I will counter you with that with my next storyline is how the Chicago Bears offense will fare. I think this Chicago Bears offense will be one of the worst in NFL history. If just saying as a fan, but outside of Justin Fields, who I thought was a very talented rookie, especially when it came to running, when it came to extending plays, when it came to just seeing downfield, things like that.
Especially with what he had to deal with, yeah.
Oh, for sure. I mean, especially he just kind of had to chuck it up to Allen Robinson sometimes, you know, so. And then David Montgomery, who's kind of an underrated running back, kind of like, you know, if you're not very much like, I guess, a casual NFL fan, that you won't really have heard much of David Montgomery, but he's a very strong, a very good downhill running back who was also decently well in terms of the pass game.
Before you go on, David, I do mock drafts and for fantasy, I do a couple a week. And I just find myself drafting David Montgomery on almost every team because he doesn't get the respect that's due to him. And he's just consistently in the 4.5 to 5 yards a carry range at the end of the year. He's going to be the focal point of that offense, probably not just in the run game, but also in the passing game as well. Where I think at Iowa State, he excelled in the passing game, and I think we're gonna see him utilized a lot more this year, mainly because there isn't a whole lot more to throw to.
I will certainly admit that as a Bears fan. To go off that point, that was with Latavius Simmons as a starter at some point. So, with 7-round picks as the starter, as like starters on the offensive line. Just going off that, this offensive line somehow has either matched or somehow got a little bit worse than it was last year. Cody Whitehair is still arguably their best offensive lineman at left guard. Tevin Jenkins, I don't think played very much last year. I don't think he played at all. Larry Borum, in the few games that he did play, held his own, but I don't know if he's, going to be like he'll be a starter, but I don't know if he'll be like a bright spot, like a star on there. They did sign Lucas Patrick, who I thought was a decent signing, and Dakota Dozier was just placed on injury reserve. So Willie Wright, I think, is going to be starting at the right guard spot. I think I just watched I listened to the Nina Kime show very recently. She did highlight the entire Bears offensive line as their most important piece going to the next season. I very much agree. Justin Fields' growth and development, though he doesn't have a ton of receiving options besides Darnell Mooney, Byron Pringle is, I guess, a solid offensive option. I didn't mind the Veals Jones drafting, and Cole Kmet has improved in terms of catching. But if he doesn't have, I guess, those 2-3 quick seconds to just kind of dump it off to really any receiver there, then this Bears offense is really not going to have any kind of movement or really any kind of success whatsoever.
Yeah, and I've got 2 words for you. Daniel Jones. Look at there was so much hype with Daniel Jones and how he was able to do both out of the passing game and utilize his legs. And he's had to utilize his legs a hell of a lot more than any of us could have even imagined because of the failed offensive line play in front of him over the first couple of years of his career. And I mean, as someone who owns Justin Fields in a dynasty league, I pray that the offensive line kinks do get worked out. Tevin Jenkins was one of the more, I don't know if I would call it controversial, but head scratching picks where it was definitely a need pick that they did instead of a value pick. I thought Tevin Jenkins was really an end of the first round, if not into the second round type of value. But the development of that offensive line is going to be so pivotal in the development for Justin Fields. And to be honest, not just Justin Fields. It's almost any young quarterback in the league. You really have to have some semblance of an offensive line to get proper development.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, this entire offense is obviously, you can say in this first year that it will be one of, it won't be a great unit. And it also has very much an entirely new revamped coaching staff with Luke Getsy as the offensive coordinator. I mean, this entire coaching staff was basically revamped from the top down. But it is also a very young unit. That was the point that our new general manager made, was he wanted to sign some very young guys who can really stick around here and just, grow and develop together and improve together. You do have some young, very solid young options in Cole Kmet. I very much loved him as a blocker in his first year. You have Darnell Mooney, who is extremely young, extremely quick, and shows not star potential, but very much starting potential. And Justin Fields, who, thank you very much for giving us the pick for that. One of the 4 very good young quarterbacks in the 2021, I think it was, draft class.
5.
So
there were 5 drafted in the top 15.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
because unfortunately we have to consider Mac Jones.
I was going to say, unfortunately, we have to consider Tua.
Zach Wilson. Mm-hmm. Huh? No.
I was going to say Tua.
That was the year. Tua was the year before. So last year was.
Oh, you're right.
That was Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence.
Yep, Mac Jones.
Mac Jones, Trey Lance, and Justin Fields. 5 in the top 15.
Which, to think Alabama had 3 NFL quarterbacks in their quarterback at some point. That's crazy to think about. But, it's obviously they're not going to be fun to watch this year. But I trust Lucas Getsy as an offensive coordinator. He worked well with the Green Bay Packers. I trust David Montgomery. I trust Justin Fields, Cole Kmet, Tevin Jenkins showed some bright spots at Oklahoma State. Lucas Patrick showed that he could be a decent option at center. Cody Whitehair, I've watched him for a while. He was fine. They have some fine options on there. But for now, I certainly think they will be historically bad in terms of offense this year.
And you talk about the Alabama quarterback room that they had.
No,
look at some of the wide receiver rooms that they've had. They had what it was Judy, Ruggs, Smith and Waddle. They had 4 first round wide receivers on the same team. I mean, who does that?
I don't know if you watched that 2019 game between Alabama and LSU. I didn't realize how much NFL talent.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
So I was actually on a business trip. I watched it from Burlington, Vermont, in my hotel room, and that was just one of the most fun football games you've ever, because you blinked and you missed 2 scores. It was so fun to watch. Blake, why don't you give us? Go.
I was just saying, even with Derek Stingley as a cornerback, then he balled out his freshman year, and
that was his
freshman year. If he was able to come out after his freshman year, he's probably a top 3 pick in the draft.
Fair enough, yeah.
Blake, why don't you give us your last storyline?
I don't think it's as big as I thought it was originally, but this very well could be the worst division in football this year. And when you think of that, you obviously compare to who else it is, and there's no other question or no other obvious choice but the NFC East. I'm sorry, but
it has been for quite some time now.
Exactly. So when you think worst division in football, you instantly compare to that, and you just look at that. Their top team, the Cowboys, 12-5. Packers are barely better than that past season at 13-4, which both are still great records. I'm not taking anything away from that. Eagles finish at 9-8, to where Vikings are at 8-9. Bears and Commanders got them beat by a game, 7-10. Bears are 6-11. Giants, I wasn't going to say it, but 4-13. The Lions 3-13. So very similar divisions last year.
Yeah.
Damn near identical. So, you take everything we've talked about as far as regressions with Green Bay at the wide receiver position. Aaron Jones, and I'm going to say this as a fantasy manager of Aaron Jones, and you guys can stop me if you think I'm wrong. But Aaron Jones will not be the monster that we think he's going to be this season. I really think that really good season he had is not necessarily not going to happen for him again, but I don't think we should expect that much from him again, especially with AJ Dillon, being who he is on that offense.
So I will have one counterpoint to that, and I do think in terms of rushing numbers, you may be right, because I do think they're going to utilize AJ Dillon more often. But historically, you look at teams who lose their number 1 wide receivers during the offseason, and the position that gains the most in terms of added targets is the running back. And and it's obviously clear who the better of the 2 pass catching running backs in Green Bay is, and that's Aaron Jones. So I think a lot of people are going to look at the emergence of AJ Dillon in terms of fantasy and say, well, I'm going to drop Aaron Jones down a little bit. I'm not doing that so much, because I do think he's just going to be utilized so much more in the passing game. So
I could agree with that as far as being more involved, but then you take a step back and look at it, and you realize he is involved because who else is involved, and you go against a good
Right.
defense and, they got to guard Allen Lazard and a rookie at wide receiver. Their focus coming in that week is going to be watch them flats, watch those screens.
Yeah.
Aaron Jones is going to want to eat. And then as soon as we bite on them, AJ Dillon's going to run it up our neck, So I do think it will be successful, but to an extent, I'm looking at like Green Bay's like high end 11 games this year they win. And I think that's if they pan out good. I honestly think this, and it could just be an off year. This isn't the end of an era. I'm not going to say that, but it could just be an off year.
The only way that they get to 11 wins is if they sweep. And again, it's conceivable that they sweep the NFC North because there really isn't a team that I think is ready to dethrone them as of yet, even though I think they do take a considerable step back. So yeah, because if you look at it, if they end up sweeping the NFC North, there's 6. There's 11 games left. Is 5 and 6 outside the division reachable? Yeah, I mean, I think they can be a 1 game under 500 team against the rest of the NFL outside, especially they're playing a first place schedule. Yeah, I can see that coming to fruition.
100%. And then when you look at, like we talked about, Lions getting better, Vikings getting better, Bears being worse, that adds to it as well. Now you got these guys beating up on each other, like you were talking about the season series. I bet it's going to be real nasty between most teams. Like, I bet most teams are going to be 1-1 on each other throughout these season series, and it's going to be because these lower guys are getting better, the higher guys are starting to get a little worse. So I think it's going to look a lot like this NFC East as far as these teams. A lot of these teams, they aren't ready yet, in a sense. So this is going to be. And just to counter that with the NFC, you can't be worse than the NFC East. Jalen Hurts might be a top 10 quarterback this year. We'll just throw that out there. With their 9-8 record last year and their offseason additions, good draft, all that. They only get better. Cowboys, they lose Amari Cooper, but that's just so CeeDee Lamb can shine like the true star he is. Terry McLaurin earlier today just signed his extension.
Yep.
So they're rocking and rolling, and you can't even look at me and tell me you don't think the Jets are going to have a better than 4-win season right now. That you don't think they will.
I really do think that every team in the NFC East improved, and you can't say that about the NFC North.
And then you put records side by side. The NFC North may be the worst division in football next year.
I was just going to ask, just to keep like the whole Jalen Hurts thing, in the NFC North topic. If you had to place Jalen Hurts in any one of these starting lineups, the Vikings, the Lions, the Bears, the Packers, would he be a starter or would he be as successful as he is with the Philadelphia Eagles?
I think if you give him to the Lions, and they're not, Jared, I don't think you're going to develop Jared Goff much more, and I hate to say that because, you never want to put the cap on a guy's potential, but I don't think you're going to develop him much more to whereas Jalen, we just saw, what he did, in one season there with rookie and Davante Smith. He would have had tomorrow, St. Brown, another rookie there who, just chemistry, different team, same kind of situation. Honestly, I'd probably rather have the offense of the Lions right now than the Eagles, which
if you told me I had to place him on one of the teams and ask which would be the best fit, it would be the Detroit Lions.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that the way that they're built, they can utilize and Jalen Hurts is really weird to read sometimes because he has you look at the first half of the season last year, and he was efficient. He was throwing for over 250 yards a game, And the second half of the season, he was under 200 for an 8-game stretch.
Mhm.
And you would think that when your number one wide receiver is a rookie,
Yeah,
the back half of the season is going to be the half
the
that
better.
you excel at, not the front half. So he also seems to want to utilize his legs to run instead of extend plays. I think if he utilized his legs to extend plays instead of just take off, he'd be a lot more successful. And especially right now, he brings in someone like an AJ Brown,
Mhm.
and AJ Brown is one of those guys that can get downfield and win those 50-50s, but he's not going to be one of those guys that you can just 3-step drop and pop it over a cornerback's head. You're going to need to extend a play sometimes to help
Mhm.
AJ Brown get there downfield. So, yeah, I think the way the offenses are built right now, you put them on the Detroit Lions. I think it's the best upgrade for him.
A successor to Aaron Rodgers doesn't sound crazy either, though.
Well, that's what Jordan Love
Yeah.
was supposed to be.
I was gonna say, isn't that
All right,
why
cool.
they utilize a first round draft pick?
Yeah,
That
and especially, I'm sorry, what?
that's still one of the more comical picks I've ever
Mhm.
come across.
I mean, especially the Detroit Lions. I think they have a first-year offensive coordinator too. I don't know if Dan Campbell was calling plays last year, but you would want someone with a decent amount of experience, like like he has in both Alabama and with the Philadelphia Eagles to really, I guess, take hold of that offense.
Yeah, they brought in Ben Johnson, who was he's a former quarterback. He went right into coaching out of college, but he's one of those young up and comers. But he was with the Miami Dolphins last year, so that they brought him in to call plays. Going to be interesting because you never know what to expect from a team with a first year play caller. So, but again, I'm gonna bounce off with my final storyline, and I always got to throw in some sort of fantasy storyline. So, my storyline is, who is the best fantasy option out of this division? Most people are going to come at you and say that it's easily Justin Jefferson, and it's going to be tough to argue that. I'm going out on a limb and saying it's Deandre Swift. I think Deandre Swift, one, running back is a much more volatile position in fantasy. But if this kid can stay healthy, we've seen the explosiveness, and I think the added weapons around him are only going to help. They're going to alleviate some of those stacked boxes, and I'm expecting huge things from Deandre Swift. I'm taking him even in the 10 to 12 range, where most of the times he's falling into the second. So DeAndre Swift is one of my guys this year. I think he's going to have a real breakout season. Again, not taking anything away from Justin Jefferson. The kid is a flat out stud. He's a superstar in the making. But in terms of being valuable to a fantasy roster, I'm gonna usually lean towards the running back. All right, so yeah, if you want to hop in.
Do you have a rebuttal to that?
Personally, I get where you're coming from with the DeAndre Swift thing. Like, he did have 1,000 yards rushing last year, didn't he? Or somewhere around. No, he didn't. Not even close. That was wrong on
No,
my part.
because yeah,
He was a very
he missed a couple games towards the end of the year.
Yes. Okay. So, I mean, he did have a very productive year last year in both of terms, in both of running and catching. And I mean, just because of how like the scoring has worked, like running backs do get a bit more points than really any other position. But I would say Justin Jefferson, not saying you're completely wrong here, but both of them do have first-year offensive coordinators. One of them, I mean, the Lions did have an inside hire, but you do have a guy in Kevin O'Connell for the Vikings who, again, literally just won a Super Bowl because of the passing game. Not entirely because of the passing game, but a main part was that passing game from the Los Angeles Rams and also the offensive coordinator in Wes Phillips. But he is also he did say so himself, I think, in an interview that the Vikings would be more pass-heavy than they were last year. I know you said they were very pass-heavy. I guess more pass-heavy than they were in recent years with the 57% thing. But it does seem like they are going to be more pass heavy, especially with getting those coaches from the Los Angeles Rams who were not very pass heavy, but did rely a lot on their passing to actually go out and win the Super Bowl. As much as people rip on Kirk Cousins, he is a very experienced quarterback. He does seem like a very solid option for the Minnesota Vikings, and he does seem like he can really hold it down in terms of the passing game. So I think he can get more fantasy points, not just because the Minnesota Vikings might win a couple more games, things like that, but he does seem to have a bit more of a solid foundation at the Minnesota Vikings than the Detroit Lions do. Not saying that they don't have a solid foundation, like we did mention that they are one of the most improved offenses in the NFC, or I guess the NFC North. But I think Justin Jefferson is going to get those because he's going to get a bit more targets. He's going to get a bit more accurate passes. He's going to be a bit more involved in the offense than he was last year.
Yeah, Deandre Swift actually, when you combine his rushing and receiving yards in 13 games, was just under 1,100. If he's able to stay healthy and on a better offense, that number could creep into the 1,600 yard total offense number. And if they do have a better offense than they did last year, it's only going to mean more touchdown opportunities as well. So,
I mean, Jefferson did catch 1,600 yards in terms of receiving yards last year.
Again, I'm not taking anything away from Justin Jefferson. The kid is an absolute stud.
I think you're on the right team, but wrong position. I think Lions wide receiver is going to be it. I want to go St. Brown. I really do, because Jameson Williams, he's dealing with the injury, so I don't think he's going to make the impact right away. But I think what we saw at the end of the year with St. Brown was I scooped him off as far as fantasy. I scooped him off waiver wires at the perfect time, and I just remember how he carried me through pretty much the rest of the season. So from a fantasy standpoint, I don't think Justin Jefferson replicates the exact same year he just had. So you expect a step back from him, not too far. I do anyways. Adam Thielen is still on the other side of that ball. Justin Jefferson's going to get his fantasy points, but you do still have Adam Thielen. Well, let's not forget about him at all. Which I get the pass heavy offense and all that, but those guys are both going to score fantasy points. Amon-Ra St. Brown is definitely going to be wide receiver 1. The guy in Detroit, I think DJ Chark is going to get a good amount of looks, but I think you need a decent wide receiver 2 just so your wide receiver 1 can be respected. You know what I'm saying? If you don't have a wide receiver 2 that gives anybody any problems, then your wide receiver 1's getting shut down all day. But just like we've been bad mouthing Goff over here, I think Goff's going to have a little bit of a vengeance here. And we've been talking about it all show. They're teetering right there along that playoff line. That's the expectations for them and a possibility for them. So they're going to need – it's going to be a lot of Deandre Swift. I do agree with that. But, like you said, he's going top 10, top 12. So maybe not who's going to be the best fantasy player, but as far as value, value. Might be the guy. He might be the guy.
So I ended up having on my 16-team league last year, heading into the playoffs, where I don't know if you remember, A.J. Brown came back and had those 2 absolute monster games after missing. So my wide receivers coming into the playoffs were Debo, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and A.J. Brown. Yeah. It was
yeah,
it was and then I had David Montgomery. I had Javonte Williams.
Yes, he was. I feel like towards the end of the season, he didn't do as good, but he was a baller for the season.
Again, and I had Cordarrelle Patterson throughout. I had actually drafted Cordarrelle. That's how deep that league was. I mean, it's 16 teams and 8 bench spots. So you can only imagine how many there. I mean, it's well over 200 players drafted, and I had actually drafted Cordarrelle Patterson in that league.
Man.
All right, well, guys, that is going to wrap it up for us today. Want to thank you guys so much for joining. Can't wait to have you as part of the Zero Technique team. Again, everyone out there, make sure you're following Backsports Page on all social media at Backsports Page. You can find me on Twitter at rstern33. Blake, why don't you give out your Twitter?
My Blake. Oh shoot, not my Blake. My handle. I want to say it's Blakey Gardner. So Blake with a Y in the middle and then Gardner.
And Alex, how about you?
My handle is Sabri01. It's the same as my Instagram.
All right. Again, thank you for joining us, and looking forward to joining next week's show.
Yeah, have a good one, everyone. Looking forward to more opportunities. Thanks, man.
Be well.
Great to be here.
Mm-hmm.